ഇന്ത്യൻ അഡ്മിനിസ്ട്രേറ്റീവ് സർവീസിൽ പ്രവേശിച്ച അദ്ദേഹം 37 വർഷത്തെ തന്റെ സർവീസിൽ അലങ്കരിച്ച പദവികൾ അനവധിയാണ്. മിനിസ്ട്രി ഓഫ് ഇൻഫർമേഷൻ ടെക്നോളജിയിൽ ജോയിന്റ് സെക്രട്ടറി, മിനിസ്ട്രി ഓഫ് എൻവയോൺമെന്റ് ആൻഡ് ഫോറസ്റ്റ് അഡീഷണൽ സെക്രട്ടറി, മിനിസ്ട്രി ഓഫ് സിവിൽ ഏവിയേഷനിൽ സെക്രട്ടറി തുടങ്ങിയ പദവികൾ അലങ്കരിച്ച അദ്ദേഹം 2005 യൂണിയൻ പബ്ലിക് സർവീസ് കമ്മീഷൻ അംഗമായി തിരഞ്ഞെടുക്കപ്പെട്ടു. UPSC ആണ് നമ്മുടെ സിവിൽ സർവീസ് എക്സാംസ് കണ്ടക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നതെന്നറിയാലോ. UPSC അംഗമായ ഒരാൾ തന്നെ നമ്മുടെ ആദ്യ സെഷൻ നയിക്കുന്നു എന്നത് അഭിമാനാർഹമാണ്. UPSC എക്സാമിനെ കുറിച്ച് സംസാരിക്കുവാൻ ഇന്ന് ഏറ്റവും അനുയോജ്യനായ വ്യക്തി അദ്ദേഹമാണെന്നതിൽ സംശയമില്ല. ശ്രീ ബാബു പോൾ IAS അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ ബ്രദർ ആണ്. ഇന്ത്യൻ സിവിൽ സർവീസിനെ കുറിച്ച് നിങ്ങളോട് സംസാരിക്കുന്നതിനായി ശ്രീ റോയ് പോൾ IASനെ ആദരപൂർവ്വം ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു. 40 മിനിറ്റ് സാർ നിങ്ങളോട് സംസാരിക്കുന്നതാണ്. 20 മിനിറ്റ് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഇന്ററാക്റ്റീവ് സെഷൻ ആയിരിക്കും. ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ ചോദിക്കുകയും സംശയ നിവാരണം നടത്തുകയും ചെയ്യാം. നെറ്റ്വർക്ക് എറർ ഉള്ളവർക്ക് യൂട്യൂബ് ലൈവ് ലിങ്ക് അവൈലബിൾ ആണ്. വീണ്ടും ജോയിൻ ചെയ്യാൻ സാധിക്കും നെറ്റ്വർക്ക് കട്ടായാൽ. അതുപോലെ തടസ്സമില്ലാതെ വെബിനാറിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്നതിനായി ആവശ്യമായ ഡേറ്റ ഉണ്ടെന്ന് ഉറപ്പുവരുത്തണമെന്ന് ഓർമ്മിപ്പിക്കുന്നു.
Dear friends, I hope I am audible and visible to you. I'm sorry for the small technical glitch which delayed this whole program by almost an hour. I guess I was invited to lead this session as the person who introduced me to you was mentioning, was that I was a member of the Union Public Service Commission for a normal term of 5 years. I mean, normal term is 6 years, but for a normal term for a retired civil servant. As you know, probably I'm the only living UPSC member, either former or present, from Kerala, and that could be the reason why my friends wanted me to tell you about this examination. Before I mention anything about the examination, because I find that the civil service interviews are over already, and therefore those who are listening to me are people who are either hoping for civil service, who are already in college or school, and also those who are preparing for the examination, the prelims, and also hopefully after that for the final examination, personality test and all that. As you know, the main framework of the British government was the ICS, or the Indian Civil Service. So there was a lot of criticism when Sardar Patel, as Home Minister, wanted to retain the ICS, and in fact, ICS officers were secretaries to most of the ministers, including Patel and Nehru, because a lot of people, critics, thought that ICS was the fifth column of the British imperialists. On the other hand, the ICS people had convinced Sardar Patel and Nehru that they were only serving the government, whichever government was in power at that point of time. However that be, the decision was taken that the newly independent government should have a stable backbone of civil service. And that's how ICS was succeeded by the Indian Administrative Service. Indian Administrative Service, the first batch was recruited in 1948. But there were people who were initially taken from other services, particularly from the ex-army who had been given the higher seniority, seniority of 41, 42, 43 and all that. But the regular recruits were recruitment was started in 1948, of 1948 batch onwards. It's a long time since we came into the service. At the time when we came in 1967, we thought that we were quite new. And the ICS people who were still in service were ancient people who were kind of fossilized people. And the early IAS officers also were quite old by that time, by our standard. But now I'm 76 plus, and most of you are of my grandchildren's age. And I'm talking to you about the civil service today. No doubt, in over the years, the civil service has changed a great deal. Civil service is no longer what it was under the British. It is no longer what it was in the initial stages, partly because a lot of activities of the government have expanded, and also because the technology has changed so much that many things which we are considering as impossible in the olden days are now very easy now. In fact, I remember when I was a collector, I used to want to talk to, I wanted to talk to my brother in Kerala, my father in Kerala. It was impossible to get a telephone connection. Today, we not only are able to get the phone connections, but we can even see people, which is a remarkable change in technology. So I also remember as joint secretary in the electronics department when we were trying to tell people in the United States and Europe that this can be done, software can be developed in India. It was very difficult for many people to believe. And people there, that India was a country of elephants and snake charmers and all that. And well, it's showing that internet connection is unstable. I hope you are able to see me and hear what I'm saying. Anyway, so I was mentioning the service has changed a great deal since the time when it was started in 1948. And naturally, the changes happened to meet the changing requirements of the country. The selection process itself has changed a great deal, because in the initial stages, what we now call the personality test or the interview was mandatory, in the sense that even if you got 100% in the written examination, if you didn't clear the personality test or interview, you could not get into the IAS at that time. This naturally led to complaints that IAS was becoming again like an elite club of people who knew each other, and the children of people who knew each other and all that. And therefore, this was changed. But by the time when we came, it was still a two-layer process. Only the All India Service people and the Indian Foreign Service were interviewed at Delhi by the UPSC directly. At that time, there was only one board, in which all members of the UPSC were present, in addition to some experts from different fields. And for the other central services like income tax and customs and all that, separate interview boards were there for which were holding interviews at different places in the country. All this was centralized subsequently, and now there is only one civil service examination for all these services. The number of services, of course, also has increased because many of the services have been split into various components so that the number has increased. But has also undergone some change over a period of time. Initially, civil service was Initially, the civil service was of the two-layer I mentioned, and after the combined examination was started, the preference was for people to choose. Even today, the preferences are there, but it is not necessary that you should get all the preferences that you ask for in your application, because that would depend upon the inter-se seniority or inter-se ranking in the written examination and the personality test together. In the initial stages, there was no reservation for outsiders. All those who would not get into their home states or preferred states were adjusted in other states at the convenience of, or rather at the availability of vacancies. But this changed when the states reorganization was done, and then various states wanted to have outsiders also among officers to be allotted to each state. Initially, even at our time, 50% of the regular recruits used to be from inside and 50% had to be from outside. Subsequently, it has changed back and forth. Sometimes it was 1/3, sometimes it was back again. Allottees to a cadre in any year are from the same state. The reason is that if the government wanted that the officers who will be operating the government machinery should have an all India perspective, should not be having very narrow loyalties, should not be subject to narrow influences of communities and relatives, and therefore there was an increasing insistence that a large number of people selected every year should go to different states. In fact, the preference used to be given due consideration up to our batch. Suddenly changed when we were waiting to be allotted to a cadre of our choice in 1967, when they decided to change the pattern because of complaints from northeastern states that they were invariably getting the lowest possible ranking people. So it was decided that all the states should be written down in alphabetical order, and all those who do not get their home states should also be written down in accordance with their ranking in the examination. And selected for one state or the other. The result was that many of us went to which were not really sought after in those days. Therefore, the outsider element has gained prominence over the years. Today, we quite often take it for granted that many of the civil service officers may be from outside the state, and they have to pass the examination, they speak quite well, and they are generally considered quite well by most of the people, including the public workers. In fact, there are advantages and disadvantages of advantages and disadvantages of outsiders. I myself was an outsider in Bihar, whereas my brother was an insider in Kerala. The advantage of an insider is that you at least have a lot, you know a lot of people even at the time of joining, and there are a lot of people who will be supporting you, helping you, and all that. On the other hand, there are always enemies within the state. Just as there are people who support you and help you, there are also people who start with the prejudice that somebody who belongs to one region or the other, one community or the other, has a soft corner for that particular region or community. Though it may not be true, and in fact, it is not true most of the time. But an outsider starts with an advantage that people generally like to have an outsider who does not have any loyalty to any community or any region in the state, and therefore is considered impartial whenever it comes to a tussle among communities, among regions, among different kind of people. So there's a great deal of advantage, and I found that in Bihar, for example, we were given great respect by the local people, including those who were in public life, including those whose recommendations were turned down by us, because they always trusted even negative answer from us as arising from impartial, honest consideration of the matter. So there was a great deal of respect, and I have no complaint at all against the state government, in spite of the fact that I served many years in Bihar. There are many others who have spent more years than me, and they also have no complaints, because all people have been taken good care of by the state government. Now, the selection process, as I mentioned, underwent a great deal of change. First, it was a two-tier selection, two-tier interviews, then a single selection of all civil service candidates, and allocation to different services depending upon the rank you get. The IAS has been generally always the first preference of all the people. Though there have been rare cases of people who wanted to go into some other service for some reason or the other, mostly sentimental reasons. And also there were people who wanted to go into foreign service, who wanted to serve abroad. But the preference for foreign service has come down over the years, for whatever reason. The marking also, as I said, went considerably, varied considerably over the years. In the beginning, it was a compulsory interview, pass was compulsory. Then the marks were higher, and finally it was brought down to be equal to the mark of one paper. Therefore, what you now have is that the personality test has the same mark as any other paper. Therefore, you may think that this is not very important. However, what I have found is that most of the people who are called for interview are within a very close range. And therefore, the marks they obtain in the personality test makes a big difference. That decides almost whether you are in or you're out, and whether you are in this service or that service. Therefore, personality test is far more important than papers. Written papers are collectively seen, and on that basis, some people are selected to be called for interview. And therefore, the interview marks turn out to be much more important than the marks you obtain in a single written paper. Now, the examination also, the interview board also, even after the civil service board was constituted, has undergone a lot of changes in order to ensure that there is absolutely no influence peddling at that level. The system now is such that nobody accuses UPSC of being partial to one or the other state or one or the other person because of the parentage or because of the language spoken and all that kind of thing. The system now is that every week the board is changed, except for the president of the board. Every member of the is president of a board, except the junior most couple of people who may be kept as standby. In case of an emergency where one of the presidents has to be absent, the standby member officiates for him as president. All the other members are changed every Monday. And the interview board now invariably consists of 4 people. 2 of them are from the government service. Basically, people who have retired as, at least one would be from the IAS who would have retired as Secretary to Government of India or Chief Secretary in a state. The other official member will be from any of the other services. It could be from the Foreign Service, it could be from the Police Service, it could be from the Income Tax or Postal Service, but somebody who has reached the highest level of that service. Then there are 2 members from the academic life. This academic world is represented by 2 people belonging to the humanities stream and the science and technology stream. Therefore, the 2 would be evenly matched, the humanities side and the science and technology side. The idea is that the people who are selected should be having a general awareness of things. Now, I mentioned that there used to be a time when the interviews were interviews, in the sense that they were mostly like bio-OC after somebody has done a PhD or an MA or MSc, in the sense that the people who are asking questions were asking questions from those subjects. If you have taken public administration as a subject, somebody might be asking questions from public administration. If your subject is literature, somebody will be asking only questions from the literature. But this is basically a personality test, a test to evaluate whether a candidate is suitable to serve as a government officer. Therefore, it is no longer important how much you know public administration, if that was, but maybe still some people out of compulsion, out of habit, asking questions from the subject which the candidate has taken either as optional or has studied in the university. Generally, every Monday, all the interview board members are given a briefing by of the Union Public Service Commission. The important direction given at that time is to evaluate the personality rather than to test knowledge of any one subject only. In other words, it's a width of knowledge which is more important. It is important. Generally, sensitive questions relating to politics or religion are not asked. Even if some questions relating to the disputes or controversies are asked, these are asked in a manner to ascertain your legal view, not about your personal view, which has anything to do with politics or religion. So generally speaking, such sensitive questions regarding religion and politics will not be asked. Nevertheless, it is important that you should be prepared to answer any question. It is also possible that the questioner may try to trip you with questions which are considered provocative. It's therefore important to keep your cool and not to be tripped, not allow yourself to be tempted to argue one way or the other. Take your stand by it. Even if the questioner changes his track there, in the next question, he has already changed his view. You must stick to your point. On the other hand, it's equally important that you should not be seen as argumentative. Nobody likes a colleague, a subordinate who is all the time arguing whether he is right or wrong and all that. It's certainly important that you should arrive at a conclusion on the basis of reason, on the basis of, you might say, a kind of internal argument. However, to be constantly being argumentative and questioning your boss is not something which will be considered a good trait by anybody. So therefore, one, stick to whatever stand you have. Two, take that stand after properly considering all aspects of the issue. Three, don't appear to be unduly argumentative, unduly arguing for one view or the other. In fact, I can give you an example. Somebody asked some question at that time when I was there. Each person has got a different perspective of who should be in the Indian team and whether batting should be given preference or bowling should be given preference, all kinds of things. You may have a view and the person who is asking the question may have a different view. You can give your view. You don't have to argue. Say that this is my view and this is something which you may differ with, but whatever is appropriate, decision to be taken will be taken by the appropriate authority. That's neither the person sitting in the board on the other side of the table or you. It's done by the selection committee. So just leave it at that. Similarly, in every matter, you should not sound unnecessarily argumentative. It's important to have a view, a stand. It's equally important that you should be able to put it across in an inoffensive way, in a way in which you are not rubbing the other person on the wrong side. You are not seen as a person who wants to establish your upper hand in the controversy. Just as I said earlier, you should have your own view and should also not sound like a person who is ready to agree with everybody. You have your view, and your view has been taken through after due consideration was given to every aspect, after an internal argument. But once having taken that view, you have good reason to stand by that, unless there are good arguments against it. Sometimes there may be good arguments against it, and you may change your view. But by and large, it is better that you should be able to stick to your stand and at the same time not sound too argumentative. So I said what is the interview board composition is, partly official, partly academic, and even in the academic representatives, there will be one from humanities, one from the science and technology side. The usual pattern is that others don't intervene. Though the president of the board, who is always a member of the Union Public Service Commission, has the right to either stop a question or to clarify. That is a privilege which is rarely used. Generally speaking, when a questioner is asking questions, he will be allowed to continue asking those questions so that neither his nor your line of thinking is affected. The questions can be from any field. Anything under the sun can be the subject of the question. Since the interviews are very closely watched, particularly in Delhi, and there are people who regularly monitor what has happened every day, in every session, in every board, the board has to be very careful to avoid repeating the same questions again and again. It's not always possible, but we do try to ensure that we don't repeat the questions again and again. Nevertheless, it is generally seen that boards are classified as liberal and conservative, or liberal means giving marks more, and conservative means giving less marks. Maybe that is to some extent true, but it is not entirely true, because there is an internal mechanism for balancing the marks system. That internal system is that after every session, the marks given by the different boards are circulated in a tabular form. It is not that how much mark each individual has been given that is shown, but how many people have been given what in what range, and what is the maximum marks which anybody has given, which is the minimum which anybody has given, how many people got the minimum, how many people got the maximum. This kind of an analysis is something which is given to every board with the instruction that they should all try to keep to the median, so that at the end of the week, every board is nearly achieving the median level. And therefore, every board ultimately is only as liberal or as conservative as every other board. Nevertheless, it is possible that the personality test marks for the same candidate every time. There have been instances when people who get very good marks in one year get very poor marks next year. It is like saying that Sachin Tendulkar or Virat Kohli is scoring a century one day and next day being out for duck. Well, you have your day. The same is also true of the people in the interview board. They may be asking questions which for which you may be very well prepared and you may answer very well. On some other days, questions may be tricky and more difficult and for which you have not prepared at all. And so your answer is too vague or sketchy. So it is not necessary that there should be that kind of consistency, and it is not possible. Even in written examination, it is not possible, because quite often happens that people who got very good marks one year get very poor marks next year. Very poor marks one year get very high marks next year. But by and large, the outstanding students of any subject do well in the examination, irrespective of the questions being asked, irrespective of the people who are evaluating the papers. Similarly, irrespective of the board, by and large, a good candidate gets good marks, always. Because the factors which guide marking is not only the content of the answer, but also the way you answer, the way you present yourself, the confidence level that you have in yourself, and the way you deal with the board. Now, let me tell you some general things. One is that people usually ask about what kind of dress should one wear while going for the interview. To some extent, it has changed from the time when we were going for the interview. The first thing which all of us did was a suit made, a matching tie purchased, and all that kind of things. It is no longer well dressed or jeans or with your sleeves folded. You go in reasonably well dressed way, not overdressed, nor underdressed, and it should appear that you are giving due respect to the board, to the occasion, to the service for which you have been called. Therefore, there is no strict instruction as to what should be the dress, and nobody really notices much, so long as it is not overdressing. And generally, people don't come, even women don't come with very colorful saree and blouse and ornaments and all that. Normally dressed, as the picture we have of officers, whether male or female. So that is not very important so long as you are not too casual and not too overdressed. The more important thing is that you should have a very wide knowledge level. And that knowledge should not be limited to only one subject. Knowledge should be in all the subjects, in the matters relating to security, national security, the matters relating to the economy, national economic situation, international economic situation, if there have been any important policy decisions, you should know about that. If there have been important developments in the international economy, you should know that. If there are any important security issues, security flashpoints, which are at that point of time when you are being interviewed, are there, you should know about that. Similarly, you should know what is the technology trend. You are not required to know to write a code. You are not required to know how exactly some scientific principles are enunciated or calculation is made or some such thing. But you should know what are the prevailing technologies and where this technology is going now. You should know how the technology is being used in general administration, how it can be used, how it can be used to improve administration or say reduce corruption and such matters. Therefore, it is important that you should have some level of knowledge of all the technology trends. Therefore, humanities and technology and science are things on board which some kind of a general awareness should be there. And this can be had by regular reading of newspapers and preferably one or two magazines, one national magazine and one international magazine. I always found that The Economist from London a very useful magazine to read because of the exemplary coverage of subjects which every issue has. But that preference may vary from person to person. But important thing is that you should have a habit of regularly reading newspapers, listening to TV or the radio for accent and news and views. You should also be familiar with the latest technology developments and science developments and finance developments and all these kind of things. Therefore, important, very, very important. Of course, the choice of subject is something on which I can't advise. There are more than 50 subjects which are available. However, practically, most people, irrespective of their educational background, choose from out of a dozen subjects. This is because of the impression that these are scoring subjects, either because the syllabus is more easily defined or because it's easier to score and easier to understand. I don't dare to mention the list of these subjects. The coaches will be in a better position to tell that. In fact, I suffer from a disadvantage that I wrote the examination when the percent system was not there. And the last few years, there have been so many new discoveries, new developments, new theories, that it will be futile for me to suggest what kind of questions will be asked and what kind of answers you should give. A younger person, somebody who has written the examination more recently, will be in a better position to answer that question. Well, there are many more things about service and service. I mean, there are controversies which surround services and examination which you may have. It's not possible for me to cover all those things in one talk. And since I have to give some time to you to ask me questions, I would like to leave it open for others to ask questions. Move. Well, I'm waiting for the questions.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, നമ്മുടെ ഒരു വെബിനാർ പാർട്ടിസിപ്പന്റ് ആണ് നജ ഫാത്തിമ. നജ ഫാത്തിമയുടെ ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ഉണ്ട് സാർ, അതിനൊന്ന് ആൻസർ ചെയ്യാമോ? ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ഇതാണ്: ഹൗ UPSC evaluates interview candidates? What all should a candidate take care while preparing for interview?
Well, it is difficult to say exactly what a person should prepare, or how there is no formula by which the interview marks are given. Only the system is such that it's not the marks given by any individual which matters. It is the overall impression which all the members gather after interviewing you, after listening to you. And the system that we have is after each interview is over, there is a discussion about the candidate. And there is an agreement about how much marks that candidate should be given. Accordingly, marks are given in the mark sheet placed before the president of the board. Therefore, it is not any particular formula. There are various aspects which are taken into account, and it is very difficult to say that if you do this, you will get X marks, and you do this, you will get 5 marks. Similarly, it is not a question of averaging so that one person can be influenced and another person has given less marks to be compensated by higher marks given by the person who is favorable to you, because it's all discussed. And nobody at that level like to give more marks to anybody because that person is familiar. Everyone would like to be objective and seen to be objective and neutral, judicious, fair, and all that. That is an overall impression which decides the marks.
Sir, is it true that everything under sun should be known for a person to pass UPSC exam? Question ചോദിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത് ദിയ ജോസഫ്. Question clear?
I didn't follow the question. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, sure, sir. Is it true that everything under sun should be known for a person to pass UPSC exam? Question from Dia Joseph.
Well, it is not possible that any single person will know everything about everything. There will be some subjects on which you may be ignorant, or at least your knowledge may not be very deep. So the board doesn't expect that you will be knowing everything about every subject. On the other hand, it is also not possible that at that level, there would be people who don't know anything about anything. So one or two things you might not know, but majority of subjects are such that therefore, if you have been reading newspapers regularly, magazines regularly, then you would be in a position to know what is it.
Sir, next question. Can we crack civil service
Yes.
in first attempt?
Yeah, please.
Question by Ben.
Sorry, I didn't follow the question.
Sir, the question is, can we crack civil service in first attempt?
Oh, can you crack a joke? Is that what you mean?
Yes. Can we crack civil service in first attempt?
I didn't understand the question at all.
So may I repeat?
Yes.
The question is, can we crack civil service in the first attempt?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course, yes. You're saying that if you are not able to immediately think of something, whether you can come back again. Is that what you mean? Crack the civil service examination. But okay, one question is about the books needed to crack the examination. That was a question by Farhan. Now I have no recommendation regarding the books to read, and maybe your coaches will tell you what kind of books you should read. All I would like to say is that, but the next question is, what are the main questions asked in interview? As I was earlier explaining, interviews are meant to be anything under the sun, anything that is important at that particular point of time, nationally and internationally, in finance, in security, in economics, in technology, in national defense, whatever, or political issues which are prevalent, that can be subject of a question. So it is very difficult to say what question will be asked. Each board we may choose its own, and each member of the board, and there is no rehearsal of what questions are being asked. And nobody knows what the other person is going to ask. A question from Joe is about taking notes from the newspaper. I don't know. That depends. It's a good habit to note down important things, but actually, very few things happen just in one newspaper, one day. These are evolving matters, and therefore, generally speaking, important matters will be present on in a number of newspapers on a number of days. And it's good to analyze each item and have your own view about that. Yeah. Well,
Sir, വേറൊരു
yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, Neema ചോദിച്ച question ആണ്. Can a physically challenged person be able to become an IAS officer?
Pardon?
Can a physically challenged person be able to become an IAS officer?
Why not? I think there is some kind of reservation also for physically challenged people. That, however, is subject to certain restrictions, because restriction in the sense you have to satisfy a medical board that you actually have the physical disability. And if the there is some kind of reservation for that. Yes.
Thank you, sir, for your
Well,
insight.
or I'm not able to hear you.
All Kerala Civil Service Orientation Program, Ignite 20.
Pardon?
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful words.
I can't hear. Hello.
Thank you, sir,
Okay.
for your inspiring words. Once again, thank you, sir. All Kerala Civil Service Orientation Ignite 2020, organized by Christ Civil Service Academy. അടുത്ത സെഷൻ 2:15 ആരംഭിക്കുന്നതാണ്. What is civil service എന്ന വിഷയത്തിൽ ശ്രീമതി രമ്യ റോഷ്നി IPS നിങ്ങളോട് സംസാരിക്കുന്നതാണ്. നെറ്റ്വർക്ക് എറർ ഉള്ളവർക്ക് യൂട്യൂബ് ലൈവ് ലിങ്ക് അവൈലബിൾ ആണ്. നെറ്റ്വർക്ക് കട്ടായാൽ ഇതേ ലിങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾ വീണ്ടും ജോയിൻ ചെയ്യുക. അതുപോലെ വെബിനാറിൽ തടസ്സം കൂടാതെ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്നതിന് ആവശ്യമായ ഡേറ്റ ഉണ്ടെന്ന് ഉറപ്പുവരുത്തുക. താങ്ക് യു.
Thank you very much. And once again, let me apologize for the delay in starting this session, and also for the somewhat disjointed way in which I spoke because of the disturbance which I had to go through while preparing for the examination and for the session. Thank you.